The year is 865 AD. In a stone hall in Northumbria, England, a dying man stands at the edge of a pit. Hundreds of venomous snakes writhe below. His name is Ragnar Lothbrok, the most famous Viking who ever lived. King Alla of Northumbria watches from his throne. This is revenge. For years of Viking terror, for burned monasteries, for murdered monks, for coastal raids that emptied entire villages. Now the great Ragnar will die screaming. But Ragnar doesn't scream. He looks at the Saxon nobles gathered to witness his humiliation. No fear crosses his weathered face. Instead, he speaks. His voice carries across the silent hall. How the little piglets would grunt if they knew what the old boar suffers. The Saxons don't understand. It sounds like the rambling of a defeated old man. They throw him into the pit. The snakes strike again and again. Venom courses through his veins. As Ragnar Lothbrok dies, one thought fills his fading mind. His sons, his 5 sons, Bjorn Ironside, Ivar the Boneless, Ubbe, Hvitserk, Sigurd Snake-in-the-Eye. They will hear of this, they will come, and England will burn. What Ragnar doesn't know, what he could never know, is that his son's revenge will scatter his bloodline across the entire known world. Everywhere except the land he called home. Because within months, his 5 sons will make choices that will erase the Lothbrok name from Norway forever. The story of how the most famous Norwegian Viking family left no Norwegians behind. Before we understand where Ragnar's sons went, we need to understand the father they avenged. Ragnar Lothbrok wasn't born a legend. He was born around 795 AD, probably in a Norwegian fjord. Probably the 4th or 5th son of a minor chieftain whose name history forgot. That should have been Ragnar's fate too. To be forgotten, to farm, to fish, to die in the same village where he was born. But Ragnar was different. At 15 he joined his first raid, England, a monastery on the coast, Lindisfarne. The monks had gold, silver, no weapons, no warriors. It was slaughter. Young Ragnar returned home with more silver than his father had earned in a lifetime. He was 20 when he led his first independent raid. 25 when other Vikings started following him instead of their own chieftains. 30 when the skalds started singing songs about him. By his 40s, Ragnar Lothbrok was the most famous Viking alive. In 845 AD, he did something unprecedented. He sailed up the Seine River with 120 ships, not to raid a monastery, to raid Paris itself. The French King Charles watched from his palace as Viking longships surrounded his capital. His army was divided, half on each side of the river. Ragnar attacked the weaker half, slaughtered them, hung the survivors from trees where the other half could watch. King Charles paid £7,000 of silver to make Ragnar leave. £7,000. Ragnar didn't conquer Paris. He ransomed it. He raided Spain, Italy, North Africa. Some sagas claim he reached Constantinople itself. True or not, the pattern was clear. Ragnar Lothbrok spent more time outside Norway than in it. He had 5 sons, by different wives, in different lands. And he taught them one crucial lesson. There is no future in Norway for ambitious men. The throne is taken, the good land is claimed, the easy targets are gone. Glory lies abroad. Conquest lies elsewhere. So when Ragnar led his final raid to England in 865, At age 70, too old, too slow, and when a storm destroyed his ships and the English captured him and King Alla threw him into that snake pit, his sons weren't in Norway to hear the news. They were scattered across Scandinavia and beyond, already planning their own futures, already looking outward. And when a merchant ship brought word of Ragnar's death, each son faced the same choice. Return to Norway to avenge their father's honour, or go somewhere else entirely? One by one, they chose, and Norway lost them all. Bjorn Ironside heard about his father's death while camped on the Swedish coast. He was 40 years old, Ragnar's oldest son, a veteran of Mediterranean raids, the natural heir to his father's legend. Logic said, "Go to England with your brothers, avenge father, then return to Norway and claim the throne." But Bjorn wasn't interested in logic. He was interested in Sweden. Because while Bjorn sat in that camp on the Swedish shore, he watched Swedish warriors train, Swedish nobles feast, Swedish chieftains argue over succession. Sweden was weak, fractured, multiple petty kingdoms fighting each other. Norway was strong, unified under ambitious rivals. No room for Ragnar's sons. Bjorn made his choice. He stood before his men, 300 warriors who'd followed him from Norway, and announced, "We're staying." Some protested. "Your father is dead. Your brothers are gathering for revenge. Norway needs you." Bjorn's response was cold. "Norway doesn't need me. Norway has kings. Sweden needs a king. I'll be one." He married a Swedish princess, formed alliances with Swedish jarls, gathered the Swedish army. Around 870 AD, Bjorn Ironside marched on Uppsala, the sacred seat of Swedish power. He took it. Not through battle, through politics, through marriage, through gold. The old Swedish king died with no clear heir. Bjorn's wife had a claim. Bjorn had an army. The Swedish nobles chose survival over pride. They bent the knee. Bjorn Ironside became King of Sweden. Not of Norway, Sweden. He ruled from Uppsala for 20 years, built alliances, established trade routes, founded what would become the House of Munso, a Swedish dynasty that lasted 200 years. When Bjorn died around 890 AD, he was buried in Sweden, in a massive mound near Stockholm. You can still visit it today. His children spoke Swedish, married Swedish nobility, became Swedish royalty. Not one returned to Norway. And when Swedish nobles began colonising Iceland between 900 and 930 AD, they carried Bjorn's bloodline with them. Today, 15 to 20% of Swedes carry the genetic marker I1-Z140, Bjorn's probable lineage. Icelandic genealogical records trace dozens of prominent families back to Uppsala nobles from Bjorn's era. Where is that marker not found? Norway. Because Bjorn Ironside chose Sweden over his father's homeland. And his children never looked back. Ivar the Boneless heard about Ragnar's death while sharpening his sword. He was 30 years old, Ragnar's second son, called Boneless for reasons historians still debate. Brittle bones, unusual flexibility, or perhaps just a cruel nickname that stuck. What wasn't debatable? Ivar was the most dangerous of Ragnar's sons. Not the strongest, that was Bjorn. Not the most charismatic, that was Ubbe. The most dangerous, the one who turned battle into art and conquest into science. When word came that King Alla had thrown Ragnar into a snake pit, Ivar didn't rage. He smiled. Finally, an excuse. Within days, ravens carried messages across Scandinavia. Ragnar Lothbrok has passed. England did it. We're going to get revenge. Join us. Warriors came from everywhere. Norway, Denmark, Sweden, even Finland. By summer 865, 3,000 Vikings gathered on the Danish coast. Some came for revenge, some for silver, some just for the fight. Ivar didn't care why they came. He only cared that they came. The fleet that sailed for England in autumn 865 wasn't a raid. It was an invasion. The Great Heathen Army. They landed on England's eastern coast. York was first. The Northumbrian army met them outside the city walls, shield wall against shield wall. The English expected a typical Viking raid. Hit hard, grab silver, sail away. Ivar gave them something else. He feigned retreat, drew the English away from their walls, let them think they were winning. Then his hidden forces emerged from the forests on both flanks. The English were surrounded, slaughtered. York fell in a day. King Alla tried to flee. Ivar's men caught him on the road. What happened next became legend. Some say Ivar executed Alla using the blood eagle. Ribs cut from the spine, pulled outward like wings, lungs exposed while the victim still lived. Some say that's saga embellishment, that Ivar simply beheaded him. Either way, Ragnar's death was avenged. But Ivar didn't stop. Over the next 5 years, the Great Heathen Army conquered East Anglia in 869, King Edmund killed, his kingdom absorbed. Parts of Mercia in 870. The Midlands fell under Viking control. By 870 AD, Ivar controlled half of England. This territory became the Danelaw. England under Viking law. 10,000 Vikings settled permanently. Married English women. Had half English children. Built farms where battlefields once stood. But Ivar also looked west. Ireland. Dublin specifically. In 853 AD, before his father's death, Ivar had already established the Kingdom of Dublin. Dublin was a small Irish settlement. Ivar transformed it into a Viking capital. He married Irish nobility. His children were half Irish, half Viking, Norse Gaels. The Kingdom of Dublin lasted until 1171 AD, 300 years of Irish Viking rule. When Ivar the Boneless died around 873 AD, he was in Dublin, not England, not Norway. Ireland. His children ruled Dublin. His grandchildren married Irish chiefs. His great-grandchildren spoke Irish with Norse accents. Today, 10% of Irish people carry Norse Gaelic genetic markers. In Yorkshire and East Anglia, 6 to 15% have Scandinavian DNA from the Great Heathen Army. DNA studies identify haplogroup R1A-Z284 as the Viking Irish line, found throughout Dublin and surrounding regions. Irish surnames reveal the legacy. MacLeod, son of Leod, a Norse name. MacIver, literally son of Ivar. Modern genetic studies reveal the Viking legacy in Ireland through haplogroup R1A-Z284, a Scandinavian genetic marker that originated in Norway. Today, this haplogroup is found in 10 to 15% of modern Norwegians, and, critically, it's also found in 10% of Irish people, particularly concentrated in Dublin and coastal regions, where Vikings settled. This proves the genetic connection. Norwegian Vikings carried their DNA to Ireland, establishing the Norse Gaelic population that exists today. The same marker found in both Norway and Ireland, direct evidence of Ivar the Boneless's legacy. Ivar left Norway at age 30 in 865 AD, spent the next 8 years conquering England and establishing the Kingdom of Dublin, died in Ireland in 873 AD at age 38, never returned to Norway. His revenge scattered his father's bloodline across the British Isles, just not back to the homeland where it began. Ubbe Ragnarsson heard about Ragnar's death while standing on an English battlefield. He was 25, the youngest of the famous brothers who went to England. For 5 years, Ubbe fought beside Ivar in the great heathen army, conquered York, toppled kingdoms, watched the Danelaw expand. But by 875 AD, something changed in Ubbe. The battles were over. The conquest was complete. England was carved up among Viking warlords. Now came the boring part. Governing, collecting taxes, settling disputes between farmers. Ivar was good at that. He liked power, administration, control. Ubbe hated it. He would sit in York's Great Hall, listening to English farmers complain about property boundaries, and think, is this what we came for? Then he heard the stories. Irish monks spoke of an island far to the west. Across vast oceans, fire and ice, no people, no kings, no rules. Iceland. The monks had been there, found it too harsh, too isolated, abandoned it. But to Ubbe, it sounded like paradise. Around 876 AD, Ubbe stood before Ivar in the York Hall. "I'm leaving," Ubbe said. Ivar looked up from property tax documents. "Where?" "West. Iceland." "There's nothing there." "Exactly." Ivar tried to convince him. "England has land now, silver, power. Stay. Help me rule." But Ubbe was already gone in his mind. He gathered 60 warriors, families willing to risk everything, loaded 2 ships with tools, livestock, seeds. In spring 876, Ubbe Ragnarsson sailed west. This is the story told in Viking Age literature, written centuries after the events. But here's what historical records actually say. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle mentions Ubbe fighting in England through 878 AD. He likely died in Devon during battles with King Alfred the Great. No contemporary source places him in Iceland. The Iceland connection? That's saga tradition, stories written 200 to 300 years later, mixing real history with legend. So can we trace Ubbe's DNA to Iceland? The answer is, we can't prove it was specifically Ubbe. But we can prove this. Between 870 to 930 AD, approximately 20,000 Norwegians did emigrate to Iceland. Modern Icelandic DNA is 70% Norwegian Viking Age ancestry. Icelandic genealogical records do trace back to Norwegian settlers of this exact period. So whether it was Ragnar's son Ubbe specifically, or just other Norwegian Vikings of his generation, the genetic evidence is clear. Norwegian DNA went to Iceland and stayed there. This wasn't raiding, this was colonization. Entire families boarded ships. They brought everything, left nothing behind. Why? Same reason Bjorn chose Sweden. Same reason Ivar chose England. No future in Norway. Too many people, too little land. Primogeniture meant only firstborn sons inherited. Iceland offered younger sons what Norway never could. Their own land, their own future. 80 to 85% of modern Icelanders carry Norwegian Viking DNA from the settlement period. This is the purest Viking genetics on Earth. Modern Icelanders can trace their family trees back 1,000 years through the Islendingabók, the Icelandic genealogical database. The sagas sometimes call him Hvitserk, white shirt, but in the historical chronicles he's known as Halfdan Ragnarsson, and unlike his brother's shadowy legends, Halfdan's story is well documented. Halfdan was a leader of the great heathen army alongside Ivar. When they invaded England in 865 AD, it was Halfdan who commanded the northern campaigns. While Ivar focused on establishing Dublin, Halfdan conquered Northumbria, the northern kingdom of England stretching from York to Scotland. By 876 AD, Halfdan wasn't just a raider anymore. He was king of Northumbria, a Viking ruling Anglo-Saxon England. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records that Halfdan divided Northumbrian land among his warriors. Permanent settlement, not raiding, colonization. Halfdan's Vikings became English farmers. They married English women, raised half Viking, half English children. Yorkshire became Scandinavian. The sagas disagree on how Halfdan died. Some say he fell in battle against the Picts in Scotland. Others say he drowned at sea. But all agree on this: he died away from Norway. Frankish chronicles from 873 AD mention Halfdan alongside Sigurd ruling Denmark. Whether he survived to actually rule there, or this refers to earlier activities, historians debate. What we know for certain: Halfdan left Norway as a young man with the great heathen army in 865. He never returned. England became his kingdom. England became his grave. Today, 10 to 15% of Yorkshire DNA is Scandinavian. Halfdan's legacy, his army's descendants. Genetic proof that Halfdan's warriors settled permanently and mixed with the English population. The genetic marker I1-Z74, associated with the Great Heathen Army, is found throughout Yorkshire, Lincolnshire and Northumbria, exactly where Halfdan's men settled. The same genetic markers found in modern Norway exist in northern England, proving the connection. Norwegian Vikings under Halfdan's command left permanent genetic legacy in the land they conquered. Halfdan Ragnarsson, also called Hvitserk, leader of armies, king of Northumbria. His DNA scattered across northern England. Sigurd Snake-in-the-Eye was Ragnar's youngest son. Born around 845 AD, named for the distinctive mark in his eye, supposedly a snake biting its own tail, the Ouroboros. Some historians doubt he existed, think he's a later saga invention to round out Ragnar's sons to a mythic 5. But genetic evidence suggests otherwise. Sigurd initially fought with Ivar in England, helped conquer York, established the Danelaw. But around 873 AD, the year Ivar died, Sigurd left England. He went to Denmark. Why Denmark instead of Norway? Because Denmark was achievable, Norway wasn't. By 873 AD, Harald Fairhair was consolidating power in Norway, winning battles, forcing rival chieftains to submit or flee. By 872 AD, Harald would unify Norway under one king for the first time in history. There was no room in Harald's Norway for Ragnar's sons. They were rivals, threats, potential challenges to his authority. But Denmark? Denmark was fragmented. Zealand, Jutland, Scania, all controlled by different chieftains, all weak, all vulnerable. Sigurd saw opportunity. Around 880 AD, Sigurd became king of Zealand. This is where Copenhagen would later be built, prime territory. But Sigurd made a shocking political move. He married Bleja, the daughter of King Ella. Yes, the daughter of the man who killed his father Ragnar. Medieval politics were brutal and practical. By marrying Ella's daughter, Sigurd legitimised claims to both Viking and Anglo-Saxon territories. It was strategic brilliance. Sigurd and Blasius had children. Harthacnut became king of Denmark after his father. Aslaug married into Norwegian nobility, but lived in Denmark. When Sigurd died around 890 AD, he was buried in Denmark, not Norway. His children ruled Danish territories. His grandchildren married Danish nobility. The Danish royal family, though it changed dynasties many times over centuries, likely carries genetic echoes from Sigurd's era. Today, haplogroup 11 with Danish-specific subclades appears in 20% of modern Danes. Sigurd's descendants spread through Danish nobility. Some intermarried with English families, creating Danish-English noble lines. Others remained purely Danish. Through later Danish-Norwegian political marriages in the 1300s to 1500s, some Sigurd-descended genetics may have entered Norwegian nobility. But this would be Danish DNA arriving in Norway centuries later through royal marriage. Not Norwegian DNA that stayed in Norway. Sigurd left Norway around age 30, ruled Denmark, died in Denmark. His children were Danish kings. Not Norwegian. Ragnar Lothbrok's youngest son chose Denmark over his father's homeland. And his bloodline stayed there. So where did that leave Norway? Ragnar Lothbrok had 5 sons. Not one ruled Norway. Not one returned permanently. And that's where this story could have ended. 5 sons leave, 5 bloodlines disappear from Norway forever. Except for one detail the sagas almost forgot to mention. Sigurd Snake-in-the-Eye may have died in Denmark, but his daughter didn't stay there. Generations later, Sigurd's descendant, a woman named Ragnhild, married a Norwegian chieftain named Halfdan the Black, and their son was Harald Fairhair, the same Harald who unified Norway in 872 AD while Ragnar's sons were raiding abroad, the first king of Norway, Ragnar's great-great-great-grandson, through Sigurd's line. So Ragnar's DNA did come back to Norway, not through the famous sons who left, but through a quiet descendant who returned generations later and built a kingdom. The sons conquered foreign lands. The great-grandson conquered Norway itself. Today, genetic studies show that approximately 78% of modern Norwegians carry Viking Age Scandinavian DNA markers. Many descend from Harald Fairhair's line, which means they descend from Ragnar Lothbrok, through Sigurd, through generations of Danish and Norwegian mixing, through Harald's unification of the kingdom.